Pablo Escobar was born in Colombia in 1949. He grew up poor and turned to crime at a young age. From a very early age, he was exposed to the harsh realities of life in the slums of Medellín. The lack of opportunities and the constant struggle for survival pushed him towards a life of petty crime. In the 1970s, he entered the cocaine trade. He was ambitious and ruthless. His entry into the drug trade marked the beginning of a new era in the world of narcotics. Escobar's vision was clear. He wanted to dominate the cocaine market, and he was willing to do whatever it took to achieve that goal. He quickly rose through the ranks of the Medellín Cartel. The cartel became a powerful force in the global drug trade. Under his leadership, the Medellín Cartel expanded its operations, establishing a vast network that spanned across continents. The cartel's influence grew, and so did Escobar's reputation as a formidable drug lord. Escobar amassed a fortune. He became one of the richest men in the world. His wealth was unimaginable, with estimates of his net worth reaching billions of dollars. He invested in lavish properties, private jets, and even his own zoo, showcasing his immense wealth and power. Escobar used violence to control his empire. He bribed and threatened officials. His methods were brutal, and he showed no mercy to those who stood in his way. The Colombian police and military were often outmatched by the sheer firepower and resources at his disposal. He intimidated and murdered rivals. He instilled fear in the hearts of many. The streets of Colombia ran red with the blood of those who dared to oppose him. His reign of terror left a lasting impact on the country, with countless lives lost in the crossfire. He became known as El Patron, the boss. His word was law. To his followers, he was a hero, a man who had risen from nothing to become one of the most powerful figures in the world. To his enemies, he was a ruthless tyrant, a man who would stop at nothing to maintain his grip on power. At the height of his power, Escobar controlled 80% of the world's cocaine trade. His influence extended far beyond the borders of Colombia, reaching into the United States, Europe, and beyond. The global cocaine trade was dominated by his cartel, making him one of the most influential figures in the world of narcotics. He was responsible for smuggling tons of cocaine into the United States every week. The sheer volume of drugs being transported was staggering, with shipments arriving by land, sea, and air. The US authorities were constantly battling to stem the flow of cocaine, but Escobar's operations were always one step ahead. He used planes, boats, and even submarines. His ingenuity knew no bounds, and he was always looking for new ways to evade law enforcement. The sophistication of his smuggling operations was a testament to his cunning and resourcefulness. His wealth and influence seemed limitless. Escobar's ambition grew. He wanted political power. He believed that with political influence he could further solidify his control over the drug trade and protect his empire from external threats. He ran for office and even bribed his way into Congress. He craved legitimacy. His foray into politics was met with mixed reactions, with some seeing him as a savior and others as a dangerous criminal. Despite his efforts, his past continued to haunt him, but his violent past made him many enemies. Rival cartels, law enforcement agencies, and even former allies turned against him. The once unassailable kingpin found himself besieged on all sides as the world closed in on him. Escobar's reign of terror left a scar on Colombia, a scar that would take years to heal. His actions were not just the work of a criminal, but of a man who declared war on his own country. He waged war on his own country, turning cities into battlegrounds and neighborhoods into war zones. The Colombian army was often seen patrolling the streets, trying to maintain a semblance of order amidst the chaos. His violence knew no bounds, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Crime scenes became a common sight, with police tape marking the locations of his brutal attacks. He targeted anyone who stood in his way, from high-ranking officials to ordinary citizens. Security personnel were constantly on high alert, guarding political figures and providing police escorts for public officials. Judges, politicians, journalists, and innocent civilians became victims of his ruthless campaign. Memorials for fallen journalists and photographs of politicians during press conferences serve as a grim reminder of the lives lost. One of the most infamous acts of Escobar's terror was the bombing of Avianca Flight 203 in 1989. This heinous act was a calculated move to eliminate a rival he believed was on board. He believed a rival was on board, and in his twisted logic, the lives of innocent passengers were expendable. The bombing was a stark example of his willingness to go to any lengths to achieve his goals. The bombing killed all 107 passengers and crew members, leaving behind grieving families and a nation in shock. The wreckage of Avianca Flight 203 became a symbol of Escobar's unrelenting cruelty. This act of barbarity shocked the world, drawing international condemnation and highlighting the extent of Escobar's reign of terror. News reporters from around the globe covered the bombing, bringing global attention to Colombia's plight. Escobar's violence created a climate of fear in Colombia, where people walked the streets nervously, always looking over their shoulders. The once bustling streets of Medellín became eerily deserted as fear took hold. People were afraid to speak out against him, knowing that any dissent could be met with deadly retribution. Interviews with Colombians revealed the pervasive fear that gripped the nation. They feared for their lives and the lives of their families, living under the constant threat of violence. Families gathered in their homes with worried expressions, while children played in the shadow of armed guards. The government seemed powerless to stop him, despite their efforts to combat his influence. Government officials often appeared distressed in meetings, and press conferences with Colombian leaders conveyed a sense of urgency and desperation. Escobar's grip on Colombia was strong, but it would not last forever. Surrounded by armed men and living in lavish properties, he seemed invincible. But his reign was destined to come to an end. His brutality and disregard for human life ignited a firestorm of opposition. Protests against Escobar grew, with graffiti and signs denouncing his actions appearing throughout the country. His enemies, both inside and outside Colombia, would soon unite to bring him down. Joint military operations and international cooperation eventually led to his capture and downfall, marking the end of a dark chapter in Colombia's history. The United States Drug Enforcement Administration, or DEA, made capturing Escobar a top priority. Agents Steve Murphy and Javier Peña were assigned to the case. They worked tirelessly to track Escobar's movements and dismantle his empire. Murphy and Peña faced an uphill battle. Escobar was always one step ahead. He had informants everywhere. He used his vast wealth to corrupt officials and evade capture. Despite the dangers, Murphy and Peña never gave up. They worked closely with Colombian authorities. They shared intelligence and coordinated raids. They put their lives on the line to bring Escobar to justice. Escobar cultivated a Robin Hood image. He gave money to the poor and built schools and hospitals in Medellín. He wanted to be seen as a man of the people. He even had political aspirations. Some Colombians viewed Escobar as a hero. They saw him as a symbol of hope in a country plagued by poverty and inequality. They admired his defiance of the government and the United States. However, Escobar's philanthropy was a smokescreen. It was a way to buy loyalty and silence dissent. His true nature was that of a ruthless criminal. He was responsible for the deaths of thousands of people. Section 5. Carlos Lehder, partner and rival. Carlos Lehder was a key figure in Escobar's rise to power. Lehder was a Colombian drug trafficker who helped Escobar establish a smuggling route through the Bahamas. He was known for his flamboyant lifestyle and neo-Nazi beliefs. Lehder and Escobar eventually had a falling out. Lehder's arrogance and ambition threatened Escobar's authority. Escobar saw Lehder as a liability. He decided to betray his former partner. In 1987, Escobar provided information to the DEA that led to Lehder's arrest. Lehder was extradited to the United States, where he was convicted of drug trafficking charges and sentenced to life in prison. Section 6. The fall of the kingpin. By the early 1990s, Escobar was a hunted man. The Colombian government, under pressure from the United States, launched an all-out offensive against him. A special police unit known as the Search Block was created to hunt him down. Escobar's empire began to crumble. His lieutenants were killed or captured. His finances were squeezed. He was forced into hiding. He moved from safe house to safe house, always looking over his shoulder. On December 2nd, 1993, Escobar's luck ran out. He was tracked down to a hideout in Medellín. A shootout ensued. Escobar was killed by Colombian authorities. Section 7. Justice and its price. Escobar's death was a major victory for the Colombian government and the DEA. It was a moment that many had been waiting for, a symbol of hope and a step towards reclaiming their country from the grip of fear and violence. It marked the end of an era of terror in Colombia. The streets were filled with celebrations, and the news of his death spread like wildfire, bringing a sense of relief to a nation that had suffered for so long. However, the fight against drug trafficking was far from over. The cartels were still powerful, and the drug trade continued to thrive, posing a constant threat to the stability of the region. The hunt for Escobar had come at a high price. The streets of Colombia had been battlegrounds with shootouts and military operations, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Thousands of people had been killed in the violence. Innocent lives were lost, and families were torn apart by the relentless brutality of the cartels. Colombian society had been deeply scarred. The emotional and psychological wounds ran deep, with communities mourning their lost loved ones and grappling with the trauma of years of conflict. The DEA had lost several agents in the line of duty. These brave men and women had made the ultimate sacrifice, and their dedication and courage were remembered and honored by their colleagues and the public. Despite the costs, the pursuit of Escobar demonstrated the importance of international cooperation in combating drug trafficking. The collaboration between the DEA and Colombian authorities was crucial in bringing down one of the most notorious criminals in history. It also showed the determination of law enforcement agencies to bring criminals to justice, no matter how powerful they may be. Their relentless pursuit of justice served as a powerful reminder that no one is above the law. Section 8. A legacy of violence. Pablo Escobar's legacy is complex and controversial. He was a ruthless criminal who terrorized Colombia and flooded the world with cocaine. He was responsible for the deaths of thousands of people. However, Escobar was also a complex figure who defied easy categorization. He was a product of his environment, a man who rose from poverty to become one of the most powerful criminals in history. Escobar's story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of greed, ambition, and the allure of power. It's also a reminder of the devastating human cost of the drug trade. Section 9. The enduring fascination. Decades after his death, Pablo Escobar continues to fascinate people around the world. His life and crimes have been the subject of countless books, films, and television shows. The enduring fascination with Escobar is understandable. He was a larger-than-life figure who lived a life of extraordinary excess and violence. His story is both compelling and repulsive. Escobar's life and crimes offer a glimpse into the dark underbelly of the drug trade and the human capacity for both good and evil. His story is a reminder that truth is often stranger than fiction. Section 10. The human cost. It is important to remember the human cost of Pablo Escobar's reign of terror. Thousands of innocent people were killed, families were torn apart, a nation was traumatized. The victims of Escobar's violence deserve to be remembered. Their stories should not be forgotten. Their suffering should serve as a reminder of the devastating consequences of violence and the importance of justice. The fight against drug trafficking continues. It is a complex and challenging issue with no easy solutions. However, by remembering the past and learning from our mistakes, we can work towards a future free